Hi, this is the last lecture video of chapter 9. I'm going to talk right about accessory organs. And so when we think about the digestive system, the primary thing we think about is the digestive tract, where the food goes in the mouth, goes down the esophagus, into the stomach, into the small intestine, into the large intestine, the rectum, the anus. And so that's one continuous tube. But there actually are some organs outside of that digestive tract that are critical for digestion to occur. And these are called the accessory organs. And they are the pancreas, the liver, and the gallbladder. And so if you were in a lab dissecting an animal, if you wanted to find the pancreas, you would lift up the stomach, and behind it, you would see this kind of very grainy, very bumpy organ. It doesn't really look like any other organs. And that would be the pancreas. And the pancreas, I think I mentioned in the first video, is a unique organ because it has major roles in two different organ systems. It produces insulin and has an important role in the endocrine system. And so most of us are familiar with that, with the pancreas and the insulin and diabetes. But the digestive function is the pancreas also produces digestive enzymes, and it produces a base to neutralize stomach acid. So, and it talks about a little bit about that up here, that they said the pancreas makes something we call pancreatic juice, and it has sodium bicarbonate, which is a base that neutralizes stomach acids. And it also makes all sorts of enzymes to digest all the different kinds of nutrients that go from the stomach into the small intestine. The second accessory organ is the liver, and the liver has probably the most variety of functions than any organ in the body, and it's also one of the largest organs of the body, depending on how you look at it. But it's here it says it's a major metabolic gland, and it's got some really critical functions. Just really generally, the liver acts as a sewage treatment plant because it removes poisonous substances from the blood and detoxifies them. Think about people that drink too much alcohol. Think of the organ that is one that is acutely affected by alcohol, and that's the liver. People can get cirrhosis of the liver, hardening of the liver. And that's because all the blood from the stomach goes right to the liver, and any toxic substances like alcohol are neutralized in the liver. But there's also lots of other functions of the liver, and one of them that I like to mention is it stores glucose as glycogen. Remember at the beginning of the semester we talked about glycogen's a big long chain of glucose. And what it allows you to do is it stores glycogen, and then it can release it over time. So we don't have to sit here eating every minute of the day in order to continuously fuel our body. There's all sorts of other functions. I was talking about here how it destroys old red blood cells. It actually helps make bile. And we're going to talk about bile in a minute when we talk about gallbladder. Helps regulate cholesterol level. There's all sorts of really important functions that are carried out by the liver. It's here talking about it's a storage organ. It stores vitamins and on and on. So the liver helps make what we call bile, and bile or bile salts is stored in the gallbladder. And so if we look at the picture up here, it's showing you that if here's the liver, the gallbladder is actually embedded in the liver there. They kind of pulled it away in this picture, but it's kind of embedded in the underside of the liver. So the bile is made in the liver, and then it's stored in the gallbladder, and the gallbladder releases that into the small intestine. And the function of that bile is something that we call emulsifying fats. It helps us digest fats. And it's important in the digestion of fats. The thing is, if people get their gallbladder out, then they say, oh, am I not able to digest fats? Well, they actually can, because their liver's still making bile. They just might, if they eat a lot of fat, it might cause some kind of digestive disruption because you don't have enough bile at one time. But a lot of people can do just fine without a gallbladder. I think that's the main thing. Oh, I guess I just wanted to mention one thing. The color of bile is that color because the liver is involved in the breakdown of hemoglobin. So when you look at red blood cells, when they get old, they end up in the liver destroys them, and it actually uses a byproduct of the hemoglobin that's released to make bile. And so the color of the feces is a result of the breakdown of red blood cells into bile, and that brown color of feces is from old hemoglobin. And let's go on to section 9.5. The last thing I want to talk about is the large intestine and defecation. So the large intestine has a few major parts: the cecum, colon, rectum, and anal canal. It's called large because it has a large diameter compared to the small intestine, but it's actually shorter. So when we look at the large intestine, here we have the small intestine kind of coming in the side, and the large intestine has an end to it. On that end is the appendix. And the appendix, what we think now, has kind of a function for it to store bacteria. So if you've had diarrhea and the bacteria in the intestines are kind of flushed out, there can be kind of a stockpile of bacteria here to repopulate the intestines. It turns out those bacteria in our large intestine are important to good digestive health. But so here we have the cecum, the end of that large intestine, and then all this part of the large intestine we call the colon. And then we get to this piece that's near the end called the rectum, where the feces are stored, and the anus that controls the feces from leaving the intestines. Let's say, I think that's probably the main function of the large intestine, and we mentioned this in the first video, is absorbing water. So it says the large intestine doesn't have or produce any digestive enzymes itself. But what's happening is any water left in the small intestine, all this chyme is really watery. It goes in here and the water gets absorbed through the wall of the large intestine into the surrounding cardiovascular system. So that makes it pretty easy to understand a little bit about diarrhea and constipation. Diarrhea is when we have too much water in the feces, and constipation is when we don't have enough. So you can imagine if you have, let's say you ate something that has a toxin, your body's sensing that there's a toxin or there's bacteria in there, that one of our defense mechanisms is for your intestines to kind of push it out of your body quickly. And so if the food goes through the large intestine too quickly, it's going to be watery. The large intestine isn't going to have time to absorb water. If the food goes out of the large intestine too slowly, it's going to get firm and hard, and you can be constipated. So you can imagine if, it happens in little kids a lot. They resist going poop on the potty. Some little kids are just not ready for it, and they're afraid of it. So they hold it. They retain their feces in their intestines, and what's happening the whole time is water's being absorbed from the feces into through the wall of the large intestine, and it gets harder and harder, and they become constipated. So we know that if you have a lot of whole grain foods and a lot of fiber, that you're less likely to be constipated. But stopping yourself from defecating can also be a big contribution to that. So that's where I'm going to stop.